You're listening to The Kylo Show, the podcast where we talk about how to keep your love on no matter what and why whole healthy families are going to save the world. In this week's episode, Danny and Brittany talk about how to build generational momentum and a family legacy that lasts. So, if you want to leave an inheritance of wisdom, prosperity, and honor to your children's children, then this episode's for you, and it starts right now.
Hello and welcome to the Kylo Show.
One more time.
One more time. I think
At
a few
least.
more times.
Yeah, probably
but
at least.
For this moment, we're here for you on the Kylo Show.
Yeah.
So, still in our series of honor and talking through what we need a revival in,
Yes.
which is real. I love the word revival because it does feel like it stirs something. So we keep putting, we need a revival in.
Yeah.
It's hopefully some ownership of all the different things we've been talking about, but
Something that is dying back to life.
So today we're talking about needing a revival in legacy,
Mm-hmm.
which I like talking about legacy.
Yeah.
I feel like it's near to my heart, and I'm more aware of it having children. I mean, Delaney's 16. It was funny. Yesterday, Bennett and Lincoln were talking, and Lincoln said, "How old do you have to be to go in the NFL?" To Ben. And Ben said, "I think you have to be 18. And so Lincoln responds, "Oh, Lainey could go to the NFL in 2 years," which was this comical idea that his sister is going to become an NFL player. But
he believes in her.
Clearly.
Yeah.
But just as my children are growing, the awareness of, man, is this thing that we're stewarding in our home going to travel with them and then be stewarded and grown and then they add to it, is something I'm paying attention to more than ever.
And legacy is kind of written right into the essence of God's covenant with his people. Like it's in the 10 Commandments. You know, honor your mother and father so that your days will be long in the land. You know, there's a connectedness families are to protect and cultivate and transfer through the generations so that God's covenant moves with all of that, so that his blessing rests on each generation of the family members in that covenant.
Which I love.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a fun, unique situation practicing and living in covenant and legacy in a way that I don't know very many people that are doing this, but to have a shared space and the influence of you and mom to the kids. You know, Lincoln has only known you and mom at the dinner table with us since his whole life of being able to remember anything, really.
Right.
Which is a
He was
beautiful.
2 when we started.
All sharing a space together. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting. I'm really curious to see how this is going to go when they're older. What they're going to look back, and hopefully we've done a really good job, which I think we have, of placing value and context even around what we're doing, what we're building. But it should be fun to have him articulate that as he gets older.
It's like the most context either side of our family silk circle has ever had for children, you know, because I think even just the plain old first world model is you grow up and you move as far away from your parents as you can get, and you stay and you raise your children, and they do the same, and then they do the same, and but this idea of living in a group where you share generational momentum in every aspect, whether it's financial, relational, cultural, whatever it is. These kids are starting on a ceiling for some of us. You know, they're like, of course we do that. Everybody's doing that. Everybody I know does that.
Delaney gave feedback to a teacher, and I was just laughing. I said, "This is great. Gives you strength and growth out of." And it's just how we talk. We talk and give feedback all the time, and it's funny to watch the next generation do it. So, but legacy in itself, and just the breakdown and God's covenant and idea to honor your father and mother feels far from a core value sometimes in what's going on today.
I remember when you were born, and I was 23, I think. I was little,
Yeah.
and I'm holding you on my arm. You fit right here, and I'm looking at you, and I remember thinking to myself, I had better grow up or you're going to die. I was just so overwhelmed with responsibility. It just hit me like a truck. And then when Delaney was born, I remember Rob, Ben's father, and I were standing out in the lobby, and he goes, well, so how does it feel to be a grandfather? And I thought, it feels very different. I feel more like a king. Like all of a sudden, I'm thinking about living my life for the benefit of my family members and not just my own children, my own household, but really the longevity of our success together. And I think that when we read the letter that John Adams writes, Abigail, it's famous now, but he says things like, I must study war and politics. I've got to get good at understanding the fabric of laying a foundation that contextualizes our morals, our agreements, our culture. I have to fight for that. I have to establish that so that my son can then go on to study science and mathematics and biology and navigation, learn the seas, just so that their children can study art, poetry, tapestry, porcelain, I think he says.
Music, yeah.
Yeah, and music. And you're like, oh, that's in the heart of every legacy-minded leader and parent, is how do I build and preserve momentum so that my children's children will benefit from the strength that I exerted in life.
Yeah. And I can fully see how that's played out in our life, what you and Mom fought for and what Ben and I are fighting for, and what I see our kids going to have to fight for. It has definitely, doesn't mean struggle doesn't exist. It just means that there's certain things you guys fought for and won that are no longer an obstacle for us. And I think that's really the goal of legacy, is that I remove one more obstacle from your life. Doesn't mean you won't have your own, but it's one battle you won't have to face.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because I think that if we don't keep in mind that we are raising up warriors, we're not raising up marshmallows.
No marshmallows.
Because marshmallows get roasted and eaten, right?
Totally.
But we've got to equip our kids to become a pioneer and a warrior in their generation with their challenges. Even establishing in education, in science and math and what have you. That's you going to university. Well, now it's just outrageous. It's just a war zone for anybody with our culture. But the idea of having to learn so much, so fast, so deep is brutal. It's just brutal. But it then sets you up to then go into a career and make your way. But now you have momentum and probably some sort of financial opportunity that you're providing for your children. But now you have to train them. Okay, what do you do with our culture in music,
Mhm.
our culture in art, our culture
Yeah.
in freedom.
Mhm.
Because I've created more freedom for you than your grandparents or I ever had. Now the task is even more pronounced on you, that you've got to figure out how to protect your core with this much freedom.
Yeah. I mean, I love when I think about the legacy of even loving on purpose. You know, what you and Mom built here, and you know, I'm here and Ben's here, and when you ask the kids what do they want to do when they grow up, so far 2 out of 3 are saying that they want to work at Loving on Purpose. And when I ask what that means, it's really just the heart of helping people.
Mhm.
And when I get to see them activate who we are as and what we've said is our culture, and then we get to put on display when it's hard, uncomfortable, but it's necessary to help people, because that's what we do. We're in the
Mhm.
helping people business. Um, it's fun to see them activate in a passion that, you know, has kind of been exposed to them and shaped in them. Obviously, not everybody's going to fit in that mold. And like I said, it's 2 out of 3 right now.
Mhm.
But creating a creative outlet of like, okay, well, where do you fit here? Not where do you just have permission,
Mhm.
but where do you fit here?
What do you add?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so that conversation, even having with, you know, Lincoln usually gives us, he wants to have Christian's job, which I don't even know if he knows what Christian's job is, but he loves Christian, and he wants to possibly work at Subway. So
Okay. Well,
it's
there's some
food.
options. There's
Yeah.
a range right there.
But just the view of, I want to stay connected to something that we have such value for as a family
Mhm.
is the beautiful thing that I've seen happen,
Mhm.
and just the exposure of our culture and legacy,
Yeah.
which is fun.
And you know, teaching them to fight and to face struggle. And you guys, you know, you have them responsible for 40, 50 animals. You know, they are getting up in the morning, getting out there in the evening. They are struggling with themselves to take responsibility, you know,
Yeah.
come heat or rain and wind, and you're there
Mhm.
out. It just thrills my heart to watch
Yeah.
these kids working out there and learning about responsibility and compassion.
Mhm.
It's just super fun
Yeah.
to watch them face their world, not as marshmallows, not as, you know, comfort creatures, but as actual responsible people who are going to be able to handle their life. You're like, that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. I don't want marshmallows.
No, and we see, you know, King David, a warrior,
Mhm.
a man of bloodshed,
Yep.
wants to build a house for God, and God says, nope, you know, it's going to have to go to your son. So David sets him up. He sets
Yeah.
Solomon up, and Solomon has all the riches that he could possibly need to do exactly that. Builds this beautiful house. The Lord fills it with his glory. It's, you know, the pinnacle of
Mhm.
Israel's
Mhm.
history.
Yep.
And there's peace in the land. And I don't know, I mean, he's got such wisdom that he does some of the most foolish things, keeping the peace.
Yeah. There's a lot of that.
He's keeping the peace. And so he begins to make these covenant relationships with other nations that have other gods. And
Mhm.
before you know it, he's got 1,000 wives who brought idols
Mhm.
into Israel. And now Israel doesn't even recognize itself. In one generation, we go from zeal for your house has consumed me to, it's all vanity.
Yeah.
It's nothing that really matters.
This is the part that confuses me about wisdom is, as you know, he had so much of it, but the desire to keep peace clouded his wisdom and created this place of complacency, and I don't know if it was laziness, but I mean, I know he wanted peace, but he welcomes all of this chaos
Yeah.
because they're afraid to have some form of confrontation, which I think would probably be a pretty mild confrontation. Maybe would end in war. I don't know, but that's part I feel like is exposed so much is that there's wisdom all over the place, but there are so many willing to compromise even within that wisdom, and that's hard to watch.
And it's shocking to see that he had wisdom and worship. He really did. And then it dissipated and it just became wisdom and knowledge. And I think that the farther he got from wisdom and worship, the more diluted and impotent Israel became. And then confused, divided, and then his son is the first king to divide the kingdom.
Yeah. So that revival in worship and revival in identity kind of create the alignment to be a host for wisdom.
Totally.
That leads to legacy.
For godly wisdom. You know, there's man's wisdom and there's godly wisdom, and they have two different ends.
They have two different masters.
Yeah. And so the man's wisdom leads man to be his own comforter. And God's wisdom leads man to struggle in the relationship so that he needs God as a comforter and strengthens that relationship instead of strengthens man's trust in himself and his own wisdom.
So then you end up with the marshmallow or the warrior between the two.
That's a book title right there.
I'm probably not going to write that one, but I do feel like that is what's out there in a lot of ways.
I've spoken at a number of men's conferences, and the quote of the men's conferences is the hard times create strong men, strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. And we are clearly in weak men are creating hard times.
Yeah.
And so we're back in the struggle again, and here we go. And strong men will come out of this, but it's just a bummer that we find ourselves faced with possibly losing our Christian heritage as a nation, our commitment to the morals of the Bible, the people valuing honor and love and virtue and that sort of thing, and starting to just go crazy with this fantasy that you can do whatever you want and it doesn't matter, and you can have as much as you want whenever you want, and somebody's always going to solve your problem for you, and that's how you end up as a slave. You end up as a slave when you have no self-control and no morals, because everybody around you says, please put them in a cage. Well, when society is in chaos, society says, please put us in a cage. And so powerful people will oblige that, and corrupt government will step in and put people in slavery.
It is sad to see the struggle that is very obvious that's happening. I'm thankful I'm married to a strong man. I feel like that is what I'm watching rise from Ben in a way that 18 years ago I wouldn't have seen the same guy that he is today. So it's great. But that place of struggle is requiring our men to grow and to find, you've spoken on this a couple times, just that conviction and to lead from that place of conviction. And it's amazing to me how much it's missing in so many places where I never thought it would go missing. And it creates so much confusion when that's missing, because it seems like it's the revival of worship and identity and legacy and value for our country and for who we are and what we're called to do. Like, well, this has been revealed that it's been shaky.
It's scary. It's scary. It's scary to watch people that you thought had convictions avoid struggle to keep
Mm-hmm.
peace and
Yeah.
comfort.
Yeah.
And the cancel culture is pretty intimidating,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be willing to say, well, I got two choices. I can respect myself or not tomorrow. I'm
Yeah.
going to do something.
Yeah.
And you're tested in, is God your provider?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's scary to have somebody threaten your livelihood because you aren't towing the line. You're not conforming.
Mm-hmm.
And so and it's a disaster that we have so many anti-Christ cultural leaders who have the power to punish.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're, wow, look at this. This is as close as we've had to persecution in the United States.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this is unusual.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very, very real.
Yeah.
And so we are going to have to reach down and grab, ourselves by the conviction and say, I refuse to conform
Mm-hmm.
to the patterns of this world. And it's going to lead to a metamorphosis that a lot of people didn't realize they needed.
Yeah.
Because we've become so comfortable
Right.
in our at peace with the world.
Yeah. Which this is where I think our tagline, Whole Healthy Families Are Going to Save the World,
Mhm.
just lights up the room full of hope, in that the more that you are driven by these, places of revival that we've covered the last few weeks, and culturally protect them in your home and steward them and train and develop your children to operate in them. And if you don't have children, you personally, you and your spouse, or you personally individually while you're searching for a spouse, this is what's going to change the outcome of things, is when we live in a place of a revival and are convicted by the biblical truth that God's put before us, and we ignite the world with whole healthy families.
Yeah. It takes courage to love.
Yes, it
It
does.
just does. It takes more courage than you ever thought you needed.
Just
And to
anyone
have
that lived through the holidays probably knows that.
to have a good marriage, you gotta have guts. You gotta
Yes.
go get it, man. To have a great family, it takes guts.
Yeah.
And it is biblical to love your family and love your nation.
Mm-hmm.
And it is time that people quit making excuses to stay out of the fray, because it's real, it's here, and we need to band together.
And it's not going away, which means we need to link arms and really press in together.
And be gutsy.
Yeah, be gutsy.
Be gutsy.
All right. Well, on that note, we're going to move to questions, because these people are
gutsy
gutsy.
move. This is a gutsy
They're
move.
gutsy
Yeah.
giving us their questions, which is great. All right. We'll be back in just a minute.
Do you want to help others create the momentum and legacy that Danny and Brittany are talking about? If you do, then here's one way to do it. Become a Life Academy facilitator. Life Academy facilitators lead Life Academy relationship courses in their local area. You can be the person who brings the change to someone's life that affects their family for generations to come. So if you want to be a Life Academy facilitator, go to LOP Life Academy, that's LOP, lifeacademy.com, and click Lead a Class today.
All right. Well, we're going to jump into our questions. And if you have a question for us, please make sure you submit that at thekyloshow.com. We love questions and testimonies.
Mm-hmm.
Those are always something that helps us here on the show. Just keep doing what we're doing. So please keep sending them. But this first one comes from Katie.
Hey, Danny and Brittany. I just want to say how thankful I am for the Kylo Show, and that I look forward to listening every week. I'm having a hard time navigating loving Jesus and my country and the criticism that come with both. I know that in the Bible we are promised that we will have tribulation. So I guess my question is, how do I limit the effects of this tribulation to my faith and love for my country?
I think that question is saying, how involved do I get in the pain of my country? And I think it really is It's a mature question in that a lot of people stay concerned about their own matters. They stay concerned about their own family. I think there's it's even past that though. Really, it's really about my country's benefit, my country's health benefits the world. So it's really a global matter in that if our country is oppressed and depressed, then we no longer have the ability to benefit the world the way we have. And I think that whole healthy families are going to save the world kind of concept, it applies to nations as well. Whole healthy nations are going to save the world. And the idea of eliminating nations so that you can have this utopia that somebody runs who has way too much power. There are zero examples in the history of mankind where a guy or a small group of guys that have power did a great job with it.
With the whole world.
Yeah. It's never happened. So I don't know why. I don't know where this crazy thinking comes from that we can take the whole world and put it under a little squad of really good people who are going to care. Like, no, that's not how this works. It's going to be free people who choose to do a good job with each other that act like a family, and act like a family that have a father and save the world.
Yeah. I think about the, Bible says to honor your fathers and mothers. And I go back to, for the United States, the personal conviction of the founding fathers. They came here and they fought for something. And, it was so biblically based in the beginning. Obviously, the times have changed drastically since then. But they had a vision and a legacy that they wanted to see happen in the United States. And so my personal conviction of stewarding that well and looks like, really participating in all the voting that happens. For me, I can't separate that I'm just going to stay in my prayer closet and hope for the best and give it to God. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to go vote with the conviction that I have at my heart. And so that's the question I've had in conversations with people is that I'm just going to stay in the prayer closet because God's big and mighty and yes, but he's also called us to be a responsible people. And so I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And I think just being mindful of, are you doing what you've been asked to do?
Yeah.
And not sitting back powerlessly, hoping that God's going to fix everything. Because I think there's still a responsibility that we are partnered in with the Lord.
Yeah, and the Bible's pretty clear that when the righteous have authority, the people rejoice, because with them comes the blessing of the Lord. And when the wicked rule, that would be the opposite. That would be an antichrist spirit. When the wicked rule, the people groan in oppression. And so there's your options. What would you like to see? Would you like to see the righteous have authority? And who would that be? Well, if you know somebody that loves the Lord and has a call to government and a gift of leadership on their life, throw your support at that person becoming an influencer with their authority. Because if you don't, that void is going to be filled by something else.
Yeah.
And so, and the
wicked's always inching on in there.
Yeah. It's just a battle. The battle between love and fear doesn't go away just because we're tired.
Right.
That
could preach. There's another book title for you.
There you go.
All right. The next question we have comes from Eric.
Hey, Danny and Brittany. Thank you so much for doing the Kylo Show. It is so encouraging to see a father-daughter team linking arms to shape culture. Can you tell me what you guys are doing to proactively leave a legacy for future generations?
We live together.
Which is, when I tell people that, I love watching their face.
Yeah.
Really?
Really?
Mostly because they start thinking about living with their own parents
Mm-hmm.
or their in-laws and the tension that lives there.
Mm-hmm.
I would, and I always am encouraging them that it's not easy. It requires sacrifice on all of our ends, but the common value and thing that we're protecting is this relationship and stewarding something that we all are so passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And I know firsthand that as soon as you guys aren't around, somebody's walking around in their underwear that isn't normally walking around in their underwear because the shared space is now just one family's space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he really enjoys it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this value that we have for, our kids being exposed to grandparents. I know that, Ben has a bit more exposure of having grandparents in his upbringing, more pairs of them than I had. We didn't have as many. It was more just mom and poppy or grandma and poppy that were around. But it was, random.
Mm-hmm.
So to have the voice of a few more years of wisdom in the house
Mm-hmm.
than just ours to navigate hard seasons, which we've had to do, to sit, to cry. I mean, I know for me, in those hard seasons, just with the kids and facing really difficult decisions. I mean, we did so many hard decisions the last couple years,
Mm-hmm.
but to feel like we're still kids because we're adult kids, but to have the wisdom and strength of parents, and then to go with that added strength into the fire with the kids of like, okay, we're navigating this. It feels a lot different than just coming over to your house and having to leave and then walking through that fire by
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an interesting added benefit I think that we've had. That's
Mm-hmm.
been really fun. That is not normal, but we have to practice this Kylo stuff often.
Yeah, and I don't know that every family could do what we're doing. I think that,
True.
there's
Very
just
true.
a lot of dynamics that just don't work. It's just
Mhm.
like, this is not going to work. But ours, it's not been easy, but it's been great.
Mhm.
And we have negotiated that. I think another thing that we're doing to promote legacy is just staying focused on building whole, healthy families.
Yeah.
If we can add anything to the momentum of other generations around whole, healthy families, that feels like a significant value add
Mhm.
to the success of a generation
Mhm.
that has been just hammered
Yeah.
with trauma around men, women, marriage,
Mhm.
parents, everything. I mean, education.
Yeah.
You're like, gosh, science. Everything is just being hammered right now. Like, if we don't have each other to hold on to through this craziness, it should be chaotic.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people it is.
Yeah. I love putting on display again what we say we're going to do, and then whether it's you and mom or Ben and I leading it, and then the kids being part of it,
Mm-hmm.
and that culture being on display. And we recently were communicated to by a teenager that says she wants culture that she sees in our family.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that her closest exposure to our family has been Delaney.
Mm-hmm.
And so from Delaney's living, and obviously there's little interactions here and there with Ben and I, but it's the stewarding. It's on display. We stick out in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that intentional practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a great way of stewarding your legacy, of being mindful of it and intentional of it. Because if you're not, there's probably something else replacing it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep, good stuff.
All right. Well, the next question we have comes from Amy.
Hi, Danny and Brittany. Thanks so much for doing the show. I've been loving the episodes on where we need to see revival in our world, and I would love to know what you're most passionate about seeing restored in our nation and in the culture. Thanks again.
I think it all starts with worship. I think it really has to begin there. That we bring lives surrendered to the one we say is God. Because as soon as I say you are God, it changes the dynamic. It doesn't, like you're the leader, that's different. Even you're the king, because most of us don't have much experience with a powerful king. But you are God removes the option of me being God. I'm going to replace you someday. No, I understand that happens in our behavior and our mindset, but in reality, no, it's not going to happen. I'm not going to replace the supernatural source of love, wisdom, righteousness, judgment. I am not going to replace that. And I do realize that one day I'll stand before him and give an account for my life. He is the final answer. And so I think every man, every woman, every child needs to realize that one day you will stand before the Lord and you will hear from him. And that's the final judgment. There it is right there. He's going to let me know how I did, and I'm accountable.
Yeah.
And I don't know why people think that is just not going to happen. You're just not accountable for anything that you do in this world. Like, where you can't even have a job like that.
Yeah.
And well, not a good job. I mean, you have a terrible job like that. You can't even be in the mafia and not be accountable. Like, what do people think?
Yeah. Well, that's a good one. Hard to top. If I were to go on to I think identity for me, which pairs well with the worship. It flows when I'm activated and confident in my identity, then my ability to live from that creates great fruit. And there's a lot of comparison and a lot of struggle to remember who you are these days. And in the place of where I can remember being a daughter of the Lord and the authority and the gifts that I have, everything in my life feels possible because I feel like there's a place of I'm encouraged that the Lord's with me. Otherwise, you just start to feel like you're drowning. And there's a lot. It's easy to start drowning. I mean, if you ask any mom home with toddlers, it's easy to start drowning in snot and graham cracker crumbs. But if I position my heart in alignment with who I am, then there's an authority that I carry, and that's my best self. So, and that's what I want is identity to be restored, because it does feel like it's been taken, and it's been a fight since. I mean, even in the garden, Eve is tempted with you're not really who you think you are, because if you were, you would be able to have everything because he says, and then there's a temptation, and then there's a given permission. So activating and walking in identity as a priority and to see that restored in this nation and all nations, I think that's where revival gets to thrive.
Yeah, it's the only way really to win the battle between love and fear is a true identity.
So that's my answer.
Good
question. Loved all of those. All right, well, we're going to jump into our testimony spot.
Last break, I talked about becoming a Life Academy facilitator. And if you're still on the fence, I want to tell you about our facilitator coaching calls. When you sign up as a facilitator, not only will you get access to a dashboard full of tools and resources to help you start and lead a class, but you'll also get access to weekly coaching calls that are live with our Life Academy pastor, Ben Serpel. In these classes, you'll meet with other world changers facilitating classes around the globe, and you'll learn best practices, share testimonies, and be fed the things that you need to impact the communities around you. So, if you want to become a Life Academy facilitator, go to LOP Life Academy, that's LOP lifeacademy.com, and click Lead a Class today.
All right, we're going to jump into the testimony, and this week's testimony comes from Elizabeth.
Oh, good.
Hey, Danny and Brittany. So I wanted to share a testimony of some of the ways that the Kylo principles have been massively impacting my life, specifically my work environment. I recently stepped into a new role in leadership and overseeing a team at my job. And soon into the role, I began to realize that there were some things that needed to be clarified, things that I just got the feeling that what I was expecting the roles to look like and what my team was expecting the roles to look like didn't match up. And using the Kylo principles, I was able to meet with my team members and have really successful conversations, asking questions first, seeking to understand, but then also being able to follow up and share my needs and my expectation. And it was really successful and really helpful. And I've seen the fruit of it already on my team, and I'm continuing to do so and learning how to have the follow-up conversations. And I feel massively more prepared for leadership, really, and the basics of what leadership is in healthy communication. So thank you so much for sharing all that you guys have gained in your lives and stories. And just super blessed to have access to these tools. My life is being changed for the better. So thanks.
Fun.
Cool.
It's
This stuff even works in leadership.
good. I would say it's hard going into what you thought your job was going to be, or maybe permission, and then getting a different message and having to navigate and have to lean in and had hard conversations. It sounds like that's something like that is going on. And that's a reality to navigate that well and stay connected to everybody.
It's disastrous when fear runs those conversations.
And insecurity, which I guess is fear, but just, that can rob you.
It's such a bummer. And then people just get so discouraged from even communicating because every time I try, it goes horrible. So I just won't do it. And I'll just feel defeated, or I'll get bitter, or I'll get passive aggressive or whatever, which just jacks up more fear.
And as a leader, creating that safe place to have exchanges and have value for feedback, even when it's directed at you, is such a skill to be developed and to navigate. I think I was talking to Delaney about job interviews and applying for jobs, and she's taking it personal when people don't call her back. And so we're navigating the feedback is not always, so personal. It's an experience someone has, and then someone doesn't call you back doesn't mean it's an attack on who you are. It's just kind of funny, just these skills that you have to develop, but they are tested in leadership more than you may realize, I think, in the day-to-day relationship and how you process, receive, and pursue healthy communication. Leadership just draws out the best or the worst of you.
It's true. I mean, in my work as a consultant with leadership teams, I am constantly teaching them Kylo. I mean, we talk about establishing a culture of honor, but it really is understanding how to do Kylo.
Man, if major corporations and businesses could utilize the Kylo principles, we'd be living in a different world.
Well, that's what I'm working on.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Danny Silk Consulting.
Yes.
That's what you're doing.
Yes.
Which is awesome. I love that. And proud of Elizabeth for really pursuing health in her role.
And being powerful,
Yep.
and winning the war over love and fear. It's so much courage right there.
Yeah.
So much courage.
Definitely is. Well, good stuff. And I loved
Good
it.
stuff. Good
So-
stuff. Good podcast. Lots of lively conversation and things to think about.
Mm-hmm.
And if people made it this far through the whole thing, congratulations. You're still with us, and we love
Thanks
you.
for that.
And you didn't
You
let
get
us
scared
chase you away with some things that we said.
Yes. And like always, we believe that whole healthy families are going to save the world.
It's so true.
And so keep fighting for that. Keep building that confidence and putting that on display and living a life that's rich in culture that you value and aligns with heaven.
And let's bring a revival to legacy.
I'm all about that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We will see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to join us next week when Danny and Brittany talk about what we must do to restore a culture of virtue and honor in the world around us. Never miss an episode of The Kylo Show by subscribing to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or watching us on the Loving on Purpose YouTube channel. Don't forget to submit your questions and testimonies to thekyloshow.com. The Kylo Show is produced by Ali Armerding, co-produced by Ashley Beck, Anna Hill, Leah Alexander, and Sherry Silk, sound engineered and edited by Taylor Silk, and show promoter Christian Zamora. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.